Hello, everyone. Chris Creamer here to tell you that this week's episode of Unified is brought to you in part by Oxford Pennant, designer and manufacturer of high-quality pennants, flags, and banners. You know how so many sports pennants are stiff and unpleasant to the touch? Well, Oxford Pennant's products are super soft, made from genuine wool felt, just like those old school vintage pennants we all know and love. One touch and you can tell this is a quality product. And did you know Oxford even produces Paul's Uni-Watch pennants? I didn't know that. Oxford Pennant has a full catalog of retail product promoting popular hometowns and clever sayings, but their real specialty is producing custom pieces for weddings, parties, and other special events. It doesn't matter if you're a couple celebrating an anniversary or the NFL's Buffalo Bills. All Oxford product is designed and manufactured at the company's downtown studio in Buffalo, New York. Check them out now at oxfordpennant.com and you can get 20% off your order with checkout code UNIFIED. That's oxfordpennant.com. Use checkout code UNIFIED for 20% off.
Hello and welcome to Unified. I am Paul Lukas of UniWatch. With me as always is my co-host Chris Creamer of SportsLogos.Net. And with the Major League Baseball season starting this week, we have something very special for you. The first guest in the history of our show, the first Unified podcast guest, and it's Ross Yoshida, the Senior Director of Design for the Los Angeles Dodgers. He has so many great stories for us. We had so many questions, and he had so many great responses that we've actually decided to break up his interview into two parts. We're going to have part one this week, part two next week. It'll be worth the wait, I promise you. We're also going to have our uniform headlines of the week, and our weekly listener-submitted question, and more. But before we get to all that, Mr. Chris Creamer, how are you?
I'm good, Mr. Paul Lukas. How are you?
I'm good. Hopefully this is the last pandemic-related update I'm going to have to give. I got my second vaccination shot last Friday. I had no side effects, not even a sore arm. And I got to tell you, the process of updating you and our listeners on, I have an appointment for the first. Well, I moved it up to a better appointment. I got the first. I have an appointment for the second shot, and I'm so sick of talking about the vaccination. Just like people are probably sick of hearing about it, and I'm looking forward to a post-vaccination life and participating again in hopefully a post-pandemic world. And I don't know what I'm going to talk about every week when we say, what have you been up to? But I have finally passed that milestone of getting the second shot.
You'll be able to tell us all about the fun things that you're doing out there now that you're immune to everything, and we can all live vicariously through you.
Yeah, because you haven't even gotten your first shot yet, right?
Oh, no, I'm months away from my first shot. Our rollout up here in Canada is a lot slower than it is in the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
You guys may have bungled the response, but you guys are nailing the vaccination. So good job there. But today, maybe they said sometime in June, if I'm lucky, I could get my first shot.
But that's a big improvement because the last I think you had said August. I don't know if you were joking, but
no, I was a joke. August would have been great at the time, but apparently there's a big order coming in here. I don't want to bore you with Canadian vaccine acquisitions, but they're saying we might get a big batch in June. So I'm hopeful that that's when it'll be. The government promises we'll get one before the end of September at least. So
all right.
It's, like I said, better than at the beginning. A few weeks ago, I said it was like 2032, and that's been moved up, which is nice. But as for my life, that's it really. Just looking forward to vaccine. I ordered a new camera for the video feed of this. Hasn't arrived yet. It's going to be here at a glorious 4K. So you can see all my flaws and the wrinkles that are approaching as I hit 40. That's it. Not a lot going on.
I'll try to upgrade my video as well because we can't have you looking that much better than I look. So
that's right. So you got the same mic as me last week.
I am now using the same microphone brand that you use. So hopefully the disparity between our vocal qualities will be better.
Right.
We'll have a more unified audio presentation as it
so because your audio is now the same as mine, I have to upgrade my video so I can just be one step above you.
Got it.
Every time.
Got it. I don't know if that's very unified of you, Chris, but
it's, a little competition. It elevates the overall quality of the show.
Fair enough.
Because now you'll get the new camera and suddenly we have a whole professional setup.
Now, I feel like this happens almost every week. We come into the episode thinking, or at least I come in thinking, there hasn't been much news, especially this time of year. This is sort of the slow period in the sports schedule because there's no football. Baseball hasn't really started yet. And basketball and hockey have sort of had all their uniform news for their respective seasons. March Madness is going on, but there hasn't been a lot of uniform news in that regard. And then sure enough, it happens every week. Right before we record, there's a bunch of things that happen. And the first thing that happened is that the New York Mets announced that, as had been hinted for a couple of months now, that they will indeed be bringing back their black jerseys and presumably black caps to go with them at some point this season. And the announcement was made Monday night. The new owner of the team, Steve Cohen, mentioned it in a chat he did with reporters and fans. And it's not a huge surprise because, again, he had hinted at that and several of the players have been lobbying for it. But it does it's a polarizing thing because Mets fans, and I count myself as one, have very strong feelings about the black uniforms. Older fans, especially, who grew up with the blue and orange, think that black is not a team color. But a lot of fans, there's a generation of fans that grew up rooting for Mike Piazza and Al Leiter and that generation of players. And the Mets did go to the World Series wearing black jerseys in 2000. They won the National League East wearing those uniforms in 2006. So, I understand. While I don't care for that uniform personally, I understand why there's a subset of the team's fan base that likes those uniforms.
Mm-hmm. I'm not a fan of them personally, but I mean, they're the original black for black's sake, aren't they? They're certainly one of the first.
They were one of the first. I think the Reds went in even harder, but the Mets and the Reds leaned in pretty hard on the initial black for black's sake wave.
If you want to go way back, Minnesota North Stars, they did it in 1982 or something, where they just added a black stripe for no reason. Again, I don't care for them too much, but I'm not going to lie, seeing the Mets out there wearing black again, I'll have good feelings back to the turn of the century, seeing Mike Piazza, seeing Franco, seeing whoever else played for the team back then. Jose Reyes played for the Mets back then. I can't remember.
Edgardo Alfonso. How could you forget Edgardo Alfonso?
I caught a Ray Ordonez batting practice home run baseball on Canada Day in Toronto in 1998.
Any kind of Ray Ordonez home run, even if only in batting practice, is a rare thing. So
super rare, right? Right. And I had no idea at the time, but I was mostly thrilled that I caught a National League ball at an American League park.
Oh, yeah. Oh. Do you still have that ball somewhere?
I have everything. So are you, how do you feel because I'm okay with it as a now and then thing, right? Once or twice this year, a throwback.
I had assumed they were going to do it for 9/11. Because the Mets are hosting the Yankees on September 11th this year. It's the 20th anniversary of the 2001 terrorist attacks. It's the first time the two New York teams will be playing each other on the date of September 11th. So all of that sort of, to me, signaled that they would wear the black jerseys because that's the era. The 2001 is the era when those jerseys were popular. Black is the color of mourning, so it's appropriate if we're going to be memorializing essentially the people who were killed that day. And I would be fine with that. And I would, in general, be fine with a one-off, maybe even an annual one-off, one game where they say ha, 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 remember how silly this looked? But the idea that they're going to be doing it for an unspecified number of games, because all they said in the announcement was a limited number of games. They didn't announce the dates. They're apparently sort of doing this on the fly. Mm-hmm. That scares me a little because I don't like the idea that it could become in subsequent seasons like the Friday alternate or the Sunday alternate or something like that, where it sort of worms its way back into the official status of being one of the team's designated alternate uniforms.
We both know that's going to happen, right?
I'll tell you, and what terrifies me even more is that by bringing in the black jerseys, you're going to also bring in all the black accessories, meaning the black undershirt, the base layer shirt, the caps, obviously, the black socks, the black belts. And there's going to be somebody in the clubhouse who says, we're wearing the basic white pinstripes tonight. Why don't we wear the black accessories with the pinstripes instead of the blue undershirt and the blue cap and all the things they normally wear? And that basically will let black kind of resume having some sort of color parity with blue. And that to me is an utter nightmare. Like, black is not a Mets team color. And it should, if you're going to do this one alternate uniform or a one or whatever it is, just keep strict church state separation, if you will. Like, I don't want the black intermingling with the blue at all. And that's what really, like, I don't want to see that. And because once you do that, then someone's going to say, hey, let's bring back the black drop shadow. And, and
let's get rid of the pinstripes.
Now we're back where we started. And, as a Met fan, I've been so happy that the Wilpons, Jeff and Fred Wilpon, who own the team, I've been so happy that they're gone and that we have a new owner. And instead, it looks like the Wilpons are getting the last laugh, that their most enduring legacy, aside from the new stadium itself, which is probably really their most enduring legacy, literally on the landscape. But in terms of a visible mark on the team, their legacy is going to be these uniforms. And instead of turning a new page with the new ownership, I feel like it's some sort of weird Wilponian nightmare flashback that I'm having.
You said you want black and blue separated in some form. Okay, so two options for you. Black and blue together, or all black uniform, including cap and pants. Which do you choose for the New York Mets?
That's a false choice, Chris. I'm not gonna take the bait on that.
You are entertaining my.
No. I mean, our theme song, our fight song, "Meet the Mets," actually has the line, "The fans are true to the orange and blue." It doesn't say anything about black, and I'm just gonna leave it there. Those are our colors.
Let's update the lyrics.
Let's update. Now, another piece of news from Major League Baseball. Yes, I am moving on. Another piece of news. Now, I should say we are recording this episode on Tuesday. It's going to launch on Thursday. But the word through the grapevine is that in that sort of black period in between on Wednesday is that the Florida Marlins are probably going to announce a naming rights advertiser for their stadium, which is currently, as we record this, is still called Marlins Park. And if they do indeed sell off the naming rights, that'll leave still, like, I was looking at the list. It is a surprisingly large number of Major League Baseball stadiums that still do not have corporate advertised names. According to my list, I've got Dodger Stadium, Yankee Stadium, Fenway Park, Nationals Park, Camden Yards, or Oriole Park at Camden Yards, if you prefer, Kauffman Stadium, which is the Royals Park, Angel Stadium, and Wrigley Field. And I know people say, like, well, Wrigley is a corporate name, but Mr. Wrigley, who owned the team, named the park after himself. And the Cubs are perfectly free to sell that name off to another advertiser if they want. They don't get any money for that. It's not a sold advertisement or a paid advertisement. So I consider Wrigley Field. It's not part of the current contemporary naming rights landscape.
The fact that the Cubs are allowed to wear a patch that say Wrigley Field on their sleeve tells you that MLB doesn't even consider that to be a corporate name.
Right, because that's normally not allowed. You're not allowed to have an advertising patch or the name or the logo of your stadium advertiser on a patch. And so, yeah, that's an excellent point. So that's 8 and 9 as we record this today. 9.
It's a third of the league.
It's a lot, and it's the most of any of the major sports. Football has a few, like Soldier Field in Chicago, Lambeau Field in Green Bay, and a few others. Basketball and hockey have almost none. The arena landscape is much more sold off in terms of the names than the stadium landscape. You've got Madison Square Garden and just a few others that don't have the.
Obviously, this sucks, right? I mean, I think there's going to be, I still call it Marlins Park T-shirt coming soon.
That's quite possible. Also this same week, the Bills announced that just yesterday that they have sold the new naming rights to their stadium as well in the NFL. And of course, they've had a sort of a merry-go-round with that because they had New Era. It was New Era Stadium, and then New Era backed out of that and ended their naming rights deal sort of prematurely. And so it was briefly Ralph Wilson Stadium again. And now it is, I forget the new name. It's a healthcare provider, an health insurance company.
That's exciting. That sings football to me. health insurance. It used to be Rich Stadium too, right? Back in the day.
It was. That was actually one of the first naming rights deals back in the 70s. Rich, I forget I think a supermarket chain. Don't quote me on that. I guess we can quote me on that because we're recording this. But it was one of the very first of the naming rights deals in North America.
Yeah, to be honest, I didn't know that was a naming rights deal.
I'll be honest with you as well. I did not know that myself until about 7 or 8 years ago, when I was sort of investigating the whole history of naming rights and naming rights deals. And I always thought it was named after some guy named Mr. Rich.
Yeah. And this kind of segues into the point I was going to make on this topic. And I mean, I hate, obviously, like everyone, I hate when a team sells the naming rights to their stadium. But if you have to, for whatever reason, it has to be done. At least name it after something that doesn't sound like a naming rights deal. Do you know what I mean? And Rich Stadium's a good example of that. I was thinking like in Cincinnati, where they have Great American Ballpark. Again, I had no idea that was a naming rights deal. I thought, oh, what a great name for a ballpark. It's the Great American Ballpark. The Great Western Forum that the LA Kings and the Lakers used to play at, right? I had no idea that Great West or Great Western was a bank. I think
this may speak to you as a Canadian, to your lack of familiarity with certain American corporate culture. That many more American sports fans may have realized what those were than you may have.
But if you pretend that it's not a company, Great Western Forum sounds like a legitimate name for that arena, right? Like it's
even here in New York, and speaking about the Mets as we were, Citi Field, like you could put that anywhere, right? Yep. Citi Field, like, except that of course it's for Citibank. Right. I tend to prefer the non-corporate names, but
obviously, but like I say, if it has to happen, gun to your head, I know you won't entertain the option there, but I consider that to be the lesser of several evils. And it's kind of unfortunate now, at least with the younger generation, and to me to an extent, where it almost feels like the stadium isn't finished or the stadium isn't real until it has that corporate name now.
That it isn't official in some way.
And I go back to the junior hockey team that plays in Oshawa, Ontario, near my hometown. They had an arena, a brand new arena. It didn't have a naming deal, and people weren't excited until they announced it was going to be called the General Motors Center. It's like, oh, awesome, and we were happy about it.
There's something really sad about that.
I know, and I feel bad that I was excited too when I heard that. But
by the same token, I have heard from some NBA fans who feel that the handful of NBA teams that don't have ad patches on their jerseys at various points over the last few years, and I think right now it's the Bucks and the Rockets are the only two, I believe. I have heard fans say like, it just looks unfinished. It doesn't. Why can't we have that like all the other teams have? And just it's a different way of looking at the world and at uniforms for sure. And speaking of NBA uniforms, the WNBA. Another bit of uniform headline news over the past week. The WNBA has had a bunch of uniform leaks, and they haven't been confirmed yet. But these have all been retail leaks. Jerseys shown at various Dick's Sporting Goods outlets, and retail leaks tend to be legitimate, unlike something that just shows up on Reddit or whatever. Yeah. Retail leaks tend to be legit historically. And it looks like Nike and the WNBA are doing something very similar for that league to what they've done for the NBA, which is have sort of city edition or what seems to be city themed jerseys. And also, speaking of ads, they've moved the advertising, which has been extremely prominent in the WNBA, like not just a little patch, but often emblazoned across the chest.
It's like soccer style.
Yeah, much more like soccer. And they have moved them, at least on these leaked jerseys. The ads are now on the back of the jersey below the number. It's still pretty prominent. It's not like a little patch. It's pretty big, but at least it's on the back. And I wonder how fans would feel. I wonder how I would feel if something similar were done in the NBA, to sort of trade off for a larger ad, but moving it to the back rather than a small patch on the front.
That's an interesting question. I kind of like how the NBA is doing the ads right now because it's so small and out of the way. I don't like when they don't match the colors. I understand why corporations don't want to do that, but small and out of the way, I think is better than a big giant patch on the back. 'Cause I think that just looks kind of silly. But what the WNBA is doing versus replacing the team name, which is what they had been doing,
Yeah.
and moving it to the back, this is a much better way for them to do it. They almost lost a little bit of credibility by having, not putting the team name across the jersey. And in a league where it's not getting as many eyeballs, you want to raise brand awareness as much as possible. It's not going to help when you don't even have the team's names on the uniform. And you're talking about, it looks like they're doing city edition uniforms. It's called the Explorer edition. I was trying to zoom in on the tag. But there's also the Rebel edition, which was an interesting idea. And it makes sense for the WNBA. Last year in the bubble, a lot of the players were wearing the vote Warnock. Was it Warnock? I can't remember.
Yeah. They were opposing Kelly Loeffler, who was the Senate,
right,
the defending Senate candidate in Georgia, who was co-owner of the Atlanta Dream.
So the WNBA is obviously, social issues is a very important thing to that league. And, this makes sense for the WNBA to do something like this. I think the Liberty jersey said equality. The Mystics said, I have it written down here, rise. And the WNBA, they're doing their own thing. They're not in the NBA shadow with this. They're not just copying, let's do a city, let's do association, let's do icon. They're doing their own thing. They're standing up for things that they believe in. And I like that they're doing that. I like that they're trying to be their own and not just copy whatever the NBA is doing. And they were the first to do color versus color in basketball too. So,
good point.
Props to them, right? Yeah, teams don't even have a white uniform in the WNBA now, right? It's all.
Yeah, I'm not so sure. I always think that's a good thing, but
Right.
It is definitely their thing. Yeah,
it is. Yes, it is trend setting.
Okay, I think that's our headlines for the week, and we're almost ready to get to our interview with Ross Yoshida. But before we do that, I want to tell you this. You probably enjoy wearing your favorite team's jersey, but what about times when you need to be a little more understated? Tokens and Icons takes authenticated, game-used MLB, NFL, and NHL uniforms and turns them into wallets, money clips, and lots of other clever, creative gift items, letting you take your favorite team's uniform with you wherever you go. In addition to pinstripes and sewn-on logos, you may find some dirt or even grass stains. It's all part of the game. And each item comes with an authentication hologram sticker, so you can look up the history and backstory of when your item appeared on the field. Tokens and Icons, a California company, has been at this for years, giving game-used sports uniforms and equipment a second life as products that always have a sense of fun and surprise. I've worked with the Tokens and Icons folks for years. I've also had the pleasure of meeting them in person at a trade show, and I can honestly say they're among the nicest, most gracious people I've ever encountered in the sports merchandising world. And I'm not just saying that. They really are wonderful people. They're also endlessly creative. With baseball season getting started, Tokens and Icons has taken a bunch of game-used balls, carefully unwound their wool cores, and added team-colored yarn to create a series of beautifully braided friendship bracelets for all 30 Major League Baseball teams. They even managed to score 2 balls from the deciding Game 6 of the 2020 World Series and are now using those balls to create a limited run of 42 Dodgers bracelets as we speak. Check them out at tokens-icons.com and get free shipping on your order by checking the For Office Use Only box and entering the checkout code UNIFIED. That's tokens-icons.com. Check the For Office Use Only box and use the checkout code UNIFIED for free shipping. And now it's time for our main topic of the week, which is our interview with Ross Yoshida, the Senior Design Director of the Los Angeles Dodgers, the first guest ever on our show, and we're thrilled to have him. Again, this is a 2-part interview, part 1 this week, part 2 next week. One note on the audio quality, Ross was speaking to us from his office at Dodger Stadium. The audio conditions were not ideal, but still pretty good. I mean, you're not going to have a problem hearing him, but if you hear a little glitch or if he drops out for a moment, don't be thrown by it. Okay, let's take it away. Here at Unified, we have not had a guest on the program until now. And we are very excited that the first guest in the history of the Unified podcast is Ross Yoshida, the Senior Director of Graphic Design at the Los Angeles Dodgers, and somebody that Chris and I have both known for many years, although we've never met him in person. And hopefully we'll get to do that in the not too distant future. Ross, thanks so much for being with us and for being the first guest on our podcast.
Thank you, guys. I'm honored to be the first guest. It's funny, we have not met, although we've communicated for so many years. We've come so very close to meeting. Like, I know, like, at some point Paul was down in San Diego, and at some point I was in New York, and at some point Chris was here in LA on vacation, and just, it's just bad luck, I guess.
Yeah, we're long overdue, but I'm glad we're at least meeting this way. And since we haven't met before, all the questions that I would have picked your brain with, had we met in person, we'll get to ask them today, and I'm sure Chris feels the same way.
All right.
Although my questions in person probably would have been a lot more stuff you can't answer on the record. To be fair.
The good stuff.
The good stuff. And it's a shame I didn't get to see you. We got stuck in the LA traffic, notorious LA traffic, and my kids, no offense to you, they would have rather gone to Disneyland than meet you. But hopefully, next time we're down, we can change their mind.
Chris clearly needs to get some new kids. The kids have the wrong priorities.
That's a horrible thing.
Hold that against them. Sorry.
All right, Chris, you want to get us started here?
I was going to say, fortunately, they're not listeners of the show, Paul, so they won't hear that. Uncle Paul, who went to the San Diego Zoo with them. Ross, you're so awesome at what you do. That's not my question. It's just a statement. It's a fact. But you had to start somewhere. So please tell us, what is your design background? What is your training? And how did you use that to land a job with the LA freaking Dodgers?
Great question. And I love to use my background as inspiration to people that may want to take an indirect or less traditional route. Like most people that do what I do, I grew up doodling logos and paying way too much attention to what the teams were wearing on the field. All-star games, MLB All-Star games were like a huge thing for me as a kid, just seeing all the different uniforms being worn, and some of the uniforms you might not see very often just because our TV consumption was so much more limited back then. So that's how I started, basically just doodling and getting in trouble in class for penciling little MLB helmet logos on my notebook. I didn't go the traditional route. I didn't even know what I wanted to do in high school. There was no real internet back then, so the information wasn't at my fingertips. I just chose to go to this, since I knew how to draw, I chose to go to this school called Los Angeles Trade Tech College in downtown LA that offered visual communications. I had no idea what that was. Did my 2 years there, failed airbrush, so I never actually even got my certificate of completion, and I couldn't get it now if I wanted to because they don't offer airbrush anymore. So that was the extent of my formal training. And during that time at Trade Tech, I was working part-time for the Dodgers answering phones for the ticket line, customer service line, 323-2241 hit. I still remember the number. And I made a few contacts just working part-time, answering phones. And when a position came up in 2001, I was ready.
That story is so familiar to me, just especially in Paul as well. We've talked about this in past episodes, where just the doodling of logos, the watching of all-star games, especially to see your own team featured on national television, is very exciting. And this is a good story about how to get a job with a professional sports team. And I did the same thing. I worked for the Toronto Blue Jays for 3 seasons, and my goal was to just get my foot in the door any way I could. and you took a job selling tickets. My first job was to sell cell phones in the concourse of the Skydome. And my idea was, okay, as long as I just get in there and I can meet the right people, make the right contacts, and from there I can move my way up to whatever job I want.
So, Ross, when you say that when a position opened up in 2001, you were ready for it, what was that position?
I think the title was just graphic designer, but back then, for whatever odd reason, the graphic designer position was in the merchandise department, because a lot of what the graphic designer did back then was designing merchandise that was sold at the park. Um, it wasn't as cookie cutter as it is now. So like a lot of the stuff that we had at the stadium was stuff you couldn't get like at the mall or through mail order. It was really exclusive stuff you can get at the stadium. Teams have kind of gone away from that, but that's how it started. When I started, it's funny, there was maybe like a handful of graphic designers around sports. I mean, literally like probably 5 or 6. So just to see how our industry has grown, like in this, from then until now, has just been crazy.
What exactly is your role and job description now? Like, how has that evolved? What is your job description with the Dodgers? And do other MLB teams have someone in the same capacity as you, as like a standard thing? Because you're also like a historian, right? Like you're like a visual historian for the team.
It just worked out that way. We do have an actual historian, Mark Langell, who I work with quite a bit on a little historical tidbits. But yeah, it just worked out that way because I'm a third generation Dodger fan and I just happen to know a lot of stuff. So, you know, I could name all of our world championships off the top of my head. It's only 7, but, you know, like the average person probably couldn't do that. So, you know, that helps me in doing my job. There are many other people in my same role across baseball, not just in baseball, but across sports. I would probably venture to say 95% of the teams have not just a person like me, but now all of the teams tend to have larger staffs because they found that pretty much they can get all of their creative work done in-house and not have to pay the premium of an outside agency.
So what is your current scope of your job? Like if you had to tell somebody, you know, I'm responsible for X, Y, and Z, like what is the full scope of what your job description is?
Basically anything creative is produced in-house by the Dodgers. You know, I'm talking like yearly marketing campaign, logos, a lot of stuff. A lot of teams do farm out. We try to keep everything in-house. We have that capability. This was like maybe the 5th or 6th year we've come up with the visual campaign and language for the season. Pretty much anything creative. We have an in-house video production team who I don't oversee, but we have a director of production, and we have 2 graphic designers under me, and then we also have a motion graphics person. So we're actually a pretty tight ship. There are teams that have much larger creative staffs than I do.
When you say, I think you said like the 5th or 6th year where you've created the visual campaign and language, you meaning how like every season has like a slogan and some sort of theme to it? Is that what you're referring to?
Right. So every year we kind of change up our look. You know, there's a different visual language, fonts, backgrounds, patterns. We do that all in-house. We do come up with the slogan in-house as well. Although I will say we're not going to start the season, the 2021 season, with a slogan for the first time in a while. It just worked out that way. And I guess our slogan is just going to be world champions.
Is that like pandemic related? Like it didn't feel appropriate to have some sort of rah-rah rallying cry, or it's just a choice to be more subdued in light of the state of the world?
Part of the discussion, and just the fact that the team finally won the championship after 32 years. It was a long wait. legal factors, just perfect storm. We just ended up with that decision not to start off with a slogan, and I'm cool with it.
When you're the champions, you don't need a slogan, right?
Yeah.
It's just period. LA Dodgers, period.
That's right. I'm a regular user of social media too, and I can live without all the positive comments we get about our slogan every year.
Whatever the Twitter hashtag is, right? So Ross, focusing more on actually designing for the LA Dodgers. This is a team that takes a very stable approach to their brand design. The uniforms have been essentially the same since 1938, with a few tweaks here and there. What's it like to be the design director for a team that has such a conservative approach to its visual program? And do you face challenges with such a locked-in identity?
As a creative person, I'm kind of like, it's my natural instinct to kind of want to push the envelope. And the Dodgers, like you said, have a very traditional aesthetic. On the other hand, I'm also very, very protective of that aesthetic. I'm very proud of it. So it definitely goes both ways. To me, what the team wears on the field is basically ground zero for your team branding, and the fact that we have one of those recognizable uniforms is just, you can't take that lightly. So like, again, I'm very protective of it, to the point of when certain folks want to change the button on the top of our hat. No, the button's been white for 70 some odd years. Let's have an alternate jersey. I know Justin Turner just put out a social post about, suggesting the blue tops on for road games, and I just don't think we need that. It might be cool for the players to have an alternate look, but I just think it's unnecessary, and we're just one of those special teams that doesn't have an alternate jersey. The Yankees, the Tigers, it's a very select few now, and I kind of like that. So I guess it does go both ways. From a design standpoint, it does get difficult when your team colors are basically blue and white. It is a challenge to keep it fresh, but I think we've done a pretty decent job of that over the years, and we will continue to try and push the envelope as far as we can.
One way where you are able to flex your creative muscles a little bit is with sleeve patches and commemorative logos. How many of those have you designed over the years, and what are some of your favorites? I'm sure they're all your favorites in one way or another, but are there some you're particularly proud of?
They're like your children. You can't pick a favorite. But if I were to pick a favorite, no, I'm just kidding. Let's see, how many have I done now? I think I'm up to 5, potentially 6. If we do a patch next year for a major event. As far as designing the patch, it's a very and anyone who has experience in the design process of a uniform element will tell you the same thing. It's a long process. It's sometimes a very frustrating process, but then once you get to the end product and you see your work on a field of play, it never gets old. It sounds corny, but it really never gets old.
When you say it's frustrating, do you mean like dealing with approvals and the sort of bureaucracy of MLB properties and that type of thing?
It's part of the gig. There's a lot of stakeholders and there's a lot of people to please. So it can draw the process out, and you also have to get these designs in, a finalized design into MLB a year in advance. So things can change in that year that might throw a wrench into things. But yeah, I say frustrating in that it maybe just adds to your work, or you might disagree with a change that is requested, but in the end, it ends up being something you take a lot of pride in.
The Dodgers seem to, there's a lot of Dodger Stadium anniversary patches. There's LA patches. There's Dodger franchise patches, including Brooklyn. So are you involved in deciding what anniversaries get their own patch? What goes into that process? And you mentioned that they need to be approved a year in advance, but the design process and the planning process starts before that part. So how far in advance are you actually working? Like, are we talking planning for anniversary logos 3-4 years from now? Like, give me a sense of that.
Not 3-4 years, but maybe a year and a half, 2 years. And yes, I am a part of the process because I'm like looking for things that we can celebrate, a year, 2 years in advance. And I did listen to one of your previous podcasts, and I know Chris was like, 60, you don't need an anniversary for 60. I completely disagree, Chris. I think every 5 years you should be celebrating. Every 5 years.
Respectfully,
what if you told your wife that? What if you told your wife, like 23rd anniversary? That is, we'll skip it.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, you know what? I won't tell her we'll skip it, but I won't design a special patch for her that year.
It's funny because the Angels, obviously the other team in LA, this is their 60th anniversary season upcoming, and they're wearing a patch, but only on their caps, not a sleeve patch. Which I since Chris and I, we're not that I think we agreed, Chris, that 60 we didn't think merited. But if you could just put it on the cap instead of the jersey, maybe.
That's right. No offense, Ross.
These are all things to consider. When I designed my first anniversary patch, which was the 50th anniversary of the Dodgers in LA in 2008, the cap logos were not really a big thing, so we didn't even consider that. And the subsequent designs, I was like, nah, like I always thought from very much of the branding / designer point of view, I was like, that's a big logo to have on the side of the hat. It kind of takes away from the LA logo in the middle. So, but I'm kind of changing my mind on that. I don't know. Like, I'm a cap collector too. It is kind of cool to see a cap. The big trend is now with all these fitted caps with the anniversary logos on the side. And I see a bunch of logos I've designed and a lot of my friends have designed, and it's kind of cool. So, I'm coming around on that. So we'll see future years. Who knows?
Well, now that there's cap patches you have to account for, like, you might have to change your style of design to make it more simple, or create an alternate version of an anniversary patch just to actually fit that small space.
Well, that's how it's usually done, isn't it? There's, like, for the cap patch, it's usually sort of a simplified, a more streamlined version.
And I will say, embroidery has come a long way since I started. They can pretty much embroider anything now, but I am in the middle of a process right now where that did become an issue, and a mark I had worked on, I did have to simplify it to work at a certain size. So that still is a concern. And young designers out there, remember to design for that thing to reduce to about a ½ inch, because although the technology has come a long ways, it's not like a laser printer yet.
What about ChromaFlex patches? How do you feel about that?
I think they're cool. I don't feel one way or another about that. I think they're just an option. They do a good job with although they don't look like embroidery, but they kind of have the texture to them. And the people that set these up do a really good job of putting these different textures on the different portions of the design. So I think they're cool. I still prefer embroidery. just probably because it's more traditional, but the Chrome Flex is a lot easier to work with in some ways.
Yeah, who would have thought the Dodger designer would prefer something traditional?
Yeah.
When it comes to that. So Ross, many of the commemorative Dodger logos you've designed over the years, they're always very heavy in symbolism. Usually, either in the form of a star, one star for each decade. I remember you doing something like that, or one star for each championship. Sometimes you throw in a local landmark. Can you walk us through that process? How and why you choose some of the symbols you choose, and how you then can work them and incorporate them into your designs.
I just like for our logos to kind of tell a story. And, when you design logos, there's not always a chance to do that. Anniversary logos give you that chance many times. So when there is something that symbolizes a championship or a pennant, or symbolizes homes and within the city or whatnot, it's just a cool little nod, a little like not obvious kind of subtle thing you can get in there that make people, and it also makes people kind of appreciate, we're still doing art here, you know what I mean? And it just helps tell the story. I like doing that. The process is always different. Sometimes before I go into designing a logo, I'll be like, I need to represent this with this. But sometimes it comes to me after. Quick story, the 50th anniversary of Dodger Stadium patch, that actually came together pretty quickly because we're kind of running short on the deadline. But I had done the sunburst in the background, and I'm like, no, like it looks cool, but I need that to mean something. So, just racking my brains, and then finally I came up with, okay, each point of this sunburst represents a park or stadium that has closed in MLB since Dodger Stadium was built. And yes, it's kind of like contrived, but it still has that meaning.
Now, when you came up with that meaning, did you count the points and say, okay, what can I get to match with whatever the number was? Or did you figure out the number of closed parks and then make the points match for that?
Yeah, so after I had kind of finalized the design, I went and counted all the parks that had closed. And I think I did have to make an adjustment. I had luckily, I think I only had to add 1 point or something. So
you had to reverse engineer the design slightly.
Yes, and one time, that process did end up biting me in the butt because it was our 60th anniversary logo. I had put these stars in it to represent all of our pennants, one while the Dodgers were in Los Angeles. Well, lo and behold, 2017, the year before this patch was supposed to come out, 2017, we make the World Series and we have to add another pennant. So I had to work with Major League Baseball in very last minute. It was actually, I think it was during the playoffs of 2017. And figure out a way to shoehorn a star into there. So it did bite me once.
Some years ago, you tweaked the Dodgers script logo, and people think of the Dodgers logo as sort of timeless and eternal and never changing. But apparently it had morphed a bit over the years, and you had to kind of restore it to its proper orientations and slant and like little sort of graphic repair work on it. Can you tell us about why that was necessary and how you went about that?
Thanks for bringing that up, Paul. Because I always say, when people ask me what's going to be the number one thing that you accomplished in your career, and granted, my career is hopefully far from being over, but I always go to that. I wish I had visuals with me, but starting in 1999, for whatever reason, I don't know if it was on the manufacturer side or what, but the Dodgers, the home Dodgers script got tweaked somehow. And if you look at old pictures, you can see how like the G, E, R, and S are really like widened out, and the slope had really like moved upwards, and the thickness of the letters had really thinned out, and to me it didn't look good. And I'm looking at all this through a fan's lens at that time. So when I finally got the gig at the very tail end of '01, that was one of the things that like I sought to correct. And we basically I redrew a whole new script, but that was evocative of the previous script before the tweaks. So it went back to the real script in 2003, and we have never looked back. But I will always say that's my greatest accomplishment, even though that's probably the thing people like no one knows about. But I corrected
when you pointed it out, like when you got the gig and said, "I want to fix this." Did you meet with any resistance? Were there people internally who said, "What are you talking about? It's the same. It hasn't changed. It's the same script." Like, or were you able to sort of make your case like very quickly and apparently, like where people could see the problem once you pointed it out?
It's funny. The people that I worked with were very open to it, and I never really think about that process, but you're right. Like something like that could meet a lot of resistance. I just show visuals. I was like, look at this script compared to this script. And then people are like, oh, yeah, like that's messed up. So it was a pretty fast process, and I didn't meet hardly any resistance. Shout out to all the people that worked with me on that.
There was a change to the cap as well, right? The L got a little bit, the serif got a little larger as well. Were you involved in that?
Yes. So we did a full, I like to call it a refresh. Ownership at the time, 2011, just felt like our logo system needed a bit of an update, and it's true, it did. If you look at old iterations of our shooting ball logo, like the streaks on the ball are really thin, and the ball is really thin, and that just doesn't reduce really well, doesn't embroider well, very difficult to reproduce. So, we fixed that. The LA logo is crazy. You think the LA logo is like, okay, it's a block LA. Like, what are you gonna really do with this? But we went through probably about 50 different looks for the LA, different weights, different size serifs, rounded serifs. And we did end up where we are now. Interestingly, the logo on the cap did not change, although technically it was supposed to. In fact, if you look closely at our cap logo, it's not really in our style guide. Like our quote unquote cap logo in the style guide doesn't really look like the cap on the field. And I'm okay with that. I think I talked to you about this before, Paul. Like, there's all these quirks, these little quirks across sports, these visual quirks, and I really like them. I appreciate them. So when we redid the LA logo, the 3D LA logo for our helmets, instead of using the actual technical logo from the style guide, we used this LA logo that had only been on our helmets since the 70s. And I think it was just a product of, back then, I think ABC made the helmets and that was their art and it hadn't changed. And I was like, well, I don't want to be the one to change it. That's a cool little quirk and we'll just keep it in there.
Was that great or what? I got to tell you, I could talk to Ross like all day. And for both of us, it was the first time, I think it's the first time I've actually spoken with him. I've emailed back and forth with him for years, but I don't think we ever Zoomed or spoke on the phone or anything. And I had so many questions. And I mean, seriously, that's the kind of thing, we could have him on every week. And we won't do that, but we will have him back next week for the rest of this interview.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're going to want to tune into part 2 of this interview because Ross drops some pretty interesting behind the scenes stuff.
He does. We asked him, it's almost as a joke, like, got any secrets to share with us? And he shared a doozy, like seriously a doozy. So you're not going to want to miss that.
All right. And before we get to our listener question of the week, I just have one last message to read off to all of you. And that is that this episode of Unified is brought to you in part by Ebbets Field Flannels, the leader in vintage, authentic sports apparel since 1988. To put that in some perspective, the first pro sports throwback game didn't even happen until 1990. But our friends at Ebbets Field Flannels, they were already setting the pace for authentic retro sportswear. They're trendsetters in the industry. And when I say our friends at Ebbets, I really mean it. You know, Paul and I, we've worked with Jerry Cohen, Andy Hyman, and the other great people at Ebbets Field Flannels for years. Ebbets even makes Paul's official Uni-Watch baseball caps. They're great people. And of course, they make and sell sensational products, including authentic vintage jerseys, caps, t-shirts, jackets, and more. Check them out at ebbets.com and get 10% off any non-NFL merchandise by using the checkout code UNIFIED. Again, that's Ebbets, EBBETS.com to get 10% off anything except NFL items with the checkout code UNIFIED.
And Chris, what is our question of the week? Our listener submitted question of the week.
Well, this week we're taking a question from Twitter, and this is from Twitter user at Kyle_probably, which is a great name. Given what a proven cash cow the secondary identity, such as local food trend, the Copa promotion they're doing in minor league baseball, how well that's been doing in the minor leagues, do you think we will ever see a Big Four major league team try the concept? Paul, what do you think?
I could definitely see that happening. It seems to, especially food, seems to be the kind of thing that a fan base rallies around. Now, often in the minor leagues, minor league teams obviously are smaller cities, and they often have a sort of underdog mentality, like they're overlooked, they're overshadowed by the big city. And so they really kind of cherish their local culture and local food items and things like that. But I could absolutely see like a Chicago team doing something about Chicago hot dogs, or, you know, whatever the case might be for a big city. And honestly, I'm a little surprised it hasn't happened already. I guess it was the Fresno Grizzlies, I think, were the first team to do this, right? With the Fresno Tacos promotion. Yep. And it really took off in minor league baseball. And I can absolutely see it happening. And I think to a degree, in a way, we're already seeing it in the NBA, because you look at some of these city alternate jerseys, like the Trailblazers, their current city uniform doesn't say Portland, doesn't say Trailblazers, it says Oregon across the front, which is based on a neon sign that is in Portland, but it actually says Oregon, and it's in a color palette that has nothing to do with the Trailblazers. And in a way, I feel like that it's almost like one of these temporary rebrandings that we see in the minor leagues. It's totally reimagining the team, and I can see. Yeah, I could see that happening. And I feel like it's already happening to a degree.
Don't forget my boys, the Toronto Raptors, they won the championship wearing North on their uniforms. And,
right.
I've only brought that up 2 or 3 times since we started recording the show, so I'm not bitter about it at all. Don't the Mercury Mets, do they count?
I guess you could say the turn ahead the clock promotion from 1999, where the Mets became the Mercury Mets. That would be something like that.
And that was supposed to be this year, right? Wasn't it supposed to be 2021?
Yes, those uniforms were. That is a subject perhaps we will tackle in a future episode.
Can't wait. But I could certainly see a team like, I feel like the Tampa Bay Rays. I don't know why. They just feel like the team that would do an alternate identity. And I mean, I guess they kind of already do it to an extent with that faux back 1979.
Because they have a faux back. They don't have a deep history. That's a team that came into existence in the late 90s. So it's not like they have some deep sacred heritage that they'd be tinkering with or tampering with. But also, I think some of the Spanish language uniforms we've seen in various sports, right? Like the Piratos or the Gigantes, or, you know, the Cerveceros with the Brewers, which are, it's not quite the same thing as a complete rebranding where they change the colors and change, you know, but I feel like that is in the same ballpark, so to speak. pun fully intended, of this kind of thing. And yeah, I do think we could expect to see something like that, because clearly the trend is toward more tinkering, not less, right now.
Paul's accent on those foreign language team names, very impressive. I don't think I could have pulled that off.
I think that's my very gringo accent. Yeah.
What I'd like to see is some of those alternate identities, like maybe the names that never were, just as a uniform logo geek. Maybe the Colorado Avalanche could wear the Rocky Mountain Extreme uniforms for one day. And
that would be. I would love to see teams do a sort of what if. That's another minor league trope, right? The what if promotion. And like, I'm a San Francisco 49ers fan, and they had that famous so-called one day helmet logo, which was actually something like 6 days, but it's odd that it's sort of become in the public mind a one day thing. But whatever, whether you want to call it one day or 1 week, they should bring that back, man, or like let it hit the field just once, like as a what if, like what could have been, what might have been. And I feel like there's a lot of opportunity for playing around with things like that. And yes, also the food thing, the different culture thing, the Spanish language thing. I clearly that's where sports design and where the universe is heading. And a lot of it would be so much better than things like Players Weekend, right? Yeah. Where it's just like a basic template that everybody uses. And instead, let each team have their own, like if you're going to mess around and sort of push the envelope or whatever cliche you want to use, like let each team do it in their own unique way.
Yeah, give Marcus Stroman a pad of paper and say, Marcus, design the Mets uniform for Players Weekend. He'd love it. You'd make him the happiest guy in the world if you let him do that.
He'd make everybody wear a single digit number.
A single digit now, and be zero too. Yeah. So everyone would be zero for the day.
So what do you think? Do you agree, or like, what's your take on all this?
I don't think I'd like to see like a food name as an alternate identity, maybe as a sleeve patch or something at the major league level. I just feel like that is a minor league thing. But I can't help but think I would love to see, maybe the Tampa Bay Giants take the field for an afternoon, or another alternate identity or a name that almost was, and doing the research for the book I did with Todd Radom, Fabric of the Game, I tried to find what the runner-up names were for every NHL team where available. And I mean, there's some terrible ones in there, but there's a lot of fun ones in there, right? Like at one point, a radio station was pushing for the Columbus Blue Jackets to call themselves the Columbus Mad Cows. That'd be fun, right? It was of the time. It was the late 90s. So yeah, we could have a lot of fun with that. And as you say, like maybe that's a future reverse retro in the NHL where you really reverse it. Now we picked an actual different name. That's the reverse part of it. Or as you say, a Players Weekend or a future NBA City Edition uniform. There's a lot of opportunities there for the big league teams to do it.
Aside from whether you want them to do it, do you think they're going to do it? Do you think it's going to happen?
Absolutely. 100%. It's going to happen, and it's going to happen like in the next 5 to 10 years. Like to me, it's definitely happening. I don't even have to think about it. Especially with Nike now taking over Major League Baseball, and they're going to throw, 8, every team's going to have 8 uniforms or something. Each one with a different name. Like, here's the first base uniform. Here's the home, whatever.
Now, should we do a what might have been episode for us where we change the name of the podcast to the other names we were considering?
That is a fun idea. Yeah. We should do that. And but then again, I don't know if I want people to go, oh, you should have called it that instead, because then I'll be like second guessing myself.
Something to keep in mind.
We'll just give them the really bad names that we were thinking of.
Yeah.
That way we can feel better.
All right. Keep those questions coming, people. We really enjoy these questions. At some point, we may do an all questions episode where we just like have a long list and go through like boom, 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 boom. And I'm actually looking forward to that. I think that'll be fun once we have enough of them piled up. So send them in. Even if we don't use your question in a given week, we may save it for a subsequent week or for an all questions episode.
Question week, the week where we didn't have any other idea.
Yeah.
That's fine. Should I read us out, Paul?
I think it's time to say goodbye.
Okay. Well, goodbye, Paul. But first, before we say goodbye, I would just like to say that Unified is a joint production of SportsLogos.Net and UniWatch. And we'd like to thank our producer editor, Chris Fratterigo, for all his help that he does on the show. Show notes for this episode are available at our show website, which is unified.show. You can follow us on Twitter at UnifiedCast, where you can also learn about the t-shirts and stickers we have for sale, which again, Paul, you and I still don't have one. We need to order them and wear them on the show one week. You can also send us your idea for question of the week at our Twitter account, which is again at UnifiedCast. Questions of the week can also be sent to us via snail mail 2.0 at info@unified.show. The Unified logo is by Brian Gundell. Our organ music at the beginning of this episode was by the Seattle band Boat. If you are listening to us on audio, you can also see video versions of this episode on the SportsLogos.Net YouTube channel, which is at youtube.com/sportslogos, where you can see the animation at the start of our videos, which is by Michael Princip. Are you interested in advertising on this show? Well, all of our advertisers have seen great returns so far. They're very happy. And you too can get in on that by emailing us at info@unified.show. If you like our show, please leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. It really helps push our show up in the listings, gets more people listening, which really is better for everyone. And we'd like to thank all of you who have already left us 5-star reviews. That's it for this week's episode. Stay well, stay safe. We'll see you all again here next week. Bye-bye.
Mr. Chris Creamer, how are you?
Mr. Paul Lucas, I'm doing great, and I'm smiling because I sold my website for 8 figures the other day.
What?
Yeah, sorry. It's April 1st. I couldn't help myself. I had a whole, I have a whole story. I can't do it. I can't do that to you, Paul. No, I wish.
This episode, not everyone is going to hear this on April 1st, Chris.
Oh, well, okay. April Fools to me then.